Welcome to 1 or 200, your friendly New Zealand politics media election podcast 2026. This is campaign season. We've been chatting with some people, candidates, issues campaigners, NGOs, union people, all sorts up and down the country. Got another exciting interview for you today, whenever you're listening to this. The nature of recorded podcasts, what can I say? My name's Philip. I'm one of your hosts. We also have Kieran. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, good. It's nice to have a dual island podcast for once. We've been too northern heavy, to
Mm.
our own discredit, I think.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you can
We got, yeah,
with what you have.
well, we're taking over, so too bad, South
Yeah,
Island. We're coming for you.
yeah.
And on that note, we have Greg Byrnes, candidate for the Alliance Party, Christchurch Central. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Yeah, kia ora. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to come along tonight. Brilliant.
No, awesome. Really looking forward to having a good yarn, understanding a bit more about who you are, your party, your place in that kind of movement, your values, all that stuff that I'm sure you're starting to get down into a tight 5 minute stand up set slash 30-second elevator pitch as the situation requires.
A little bit, but I tend to be a person of tangents, so 5 minutes is usually a little too sort of lean for my
Oh,
message.
mate, you're in the right place. We'll
Good.
try to put you to bed before midnight. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, cool, Greg. Well, why don't you just lead us off? Tell us a bit about yourself, your background. You've obviously got a bit of experience
Sure.
around the track, and our listeners don't know who you are. So lead us off however you wish.
Absolutely. Look, kia ora. My name's Greg Byrnes. I'm born in Christchurch and still here. I'm 65. I actually officially retired last November. Prior to that, I was a regional councillor for the Canterbury Regional Council Environment Canterbury. And prior to that, 13 years of the general manager for a place called Te Kohaka or Tuhaitara Trust, which was established as an outcome of the settlement between the Crown and Te Rūnanga Ngaitahu and based around environmental restoration. So my background is in the environment. Basically, from the time I left school, working for local government, environmental agencies, that type of thing. My background is, I guess, a tree hugger. So that's where I've been. I accidentally fell into politics, although I come from a very solid background in politics. My father worked on the railways, my brother worked on the railways, so heavily unionised. My ex-wife, her uncle was the second Sinn Féin mayor of Belfast, so very staunch Republicans. Her dad immigrated out here, and Friday nights were finishing work, coming home, kids into bed, and just talking about the politics of the week. So heavily involved with that. Lots of letters to the editor, and then actually one of the Green Party members told me that I should stand for Environment Canterbury when she was leaving to take on a role as a candidate in the Green Party. That's Lan Farm, who I've known for many years through environmental work. And yeah, here I am. So happily to retire to my garage with a few old motorcycles, an 18-month-old granddaughter, being involved with the activities that I'm sort of currently involved with, sustainable autotahi, a little bit with the Palestine Solidarity Network of autotahi, really the outreach stuff, bit of volunteer work for some environmental agencies, and I thought that was my bit. But the Alliance Party came a calling, and initially, while saying, no, I think you need to get some younger people involved, I'm absolutely blown away by how enthusiastic the younger people that they actually have involved and how organised they've become. And ultimately, my daughter said to me, you've constantly preached about, for us now and for the future generations, you've got a granddaughter. Yeah, you really have no choice. You've got to put up. So here I am. And Alliance Party, I guess it really sort of re-established during the local elections last year when the party president, Tom Rowd, stood for Christchurch City Council. And while the numbers weren't huge on the ballot, it at least got a message out there, and certainly a lot of people were going, hey, that's really interesting. And from there, it's got to the point now where we're re-registered with the 500 members. We're over 500 members. We have a party boss, Victor Billick, who was a candidate previously. And what I like about the party is much of it is people who were involved with the alliance before returning, along with some very young people, which is great. So is that a pretty good introduction for you?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And kind of segues into the next thing I wanted to ask about the previous incarnation. Like pretty much all the headlines we've seen about the Alliance have been about the return of this, mythical beast from the Anderson era and that whole, that period, which was, I guess, my younger days. And I imagine lots of our listeners won't know much about that at all. So, could you give us a quick kind of history lesson? And I don't know what or if any part you played in those organizations back in those days, or if you knew any of those people, but what your kind of impression is of the change and development.
Well, no, I didn't play a part in the alliance. In fact, I lived overseas at the time. However, as I said earlier, many of the people that are involved now have been previously involved with the party. Certainly, a lot of the people who are involved with the policy development, which we're very close to putting out some real good detail, have been involved with whether it be New Labour, the Alliance. I myself was a Green Party member for a short period of time. I've got a wee anecdote actually. When I first got the opportunity to vote as a young man, my mum said to me, "You must vote. You're obliged to vote. People have sacrificed in order for you to have that, and you must do it. Who you vote for, go out, learn a bit." And bearing in mind in those days it was pretty much a two-horse race. She said, "So who you vote for is up to you. However, if you vote anything other than Labour, your grandfather would roll over in his grave," which gives you an idea of where I come from. I did join the Green Party not that long ago when Lan was first elected, and that was really because I really connected with the message she had in her opening speech to Parliament. I thought she really nailed everything, and their values not dissimilar to the Alliance, bearing in mind that the Greens were part of that early formation of the party. Unfortunately, I don't see myself represented in the Greens anymore, and I think that's a bit of a shame. That's literally because I think Labor have moved to the central don't rock the boat position and trying to capture what they think is their market. And the Greens, through necessity, I think, have sort of formulated sort of identity politics in order to be able to cater for many groups without there who have issues. And unfortunately for that, this glaring gap, if you ask me, is for working people. So that's where I am. The interesting part about the Green Party, when I did leave, I was asked why. And I said, well, I don't see myself represented anymore. Through necessity, I think the Green Party have tended to move away from what I believe is traditionally a Green Party. And that I'm not trying to fault them, but it's because there's a gap there. And that, I guess, has necessitated people saying, we need to fill that gap. We need to represent working people across the country. And I think that's represented in the fact that the Maritime Union of New Zealand have now aligned with the Alliance Party, which is huge. They're still with Labor, but I think the fact that we're the first party outside of Labor that's ever had an alliance or an alignment with a union is big news. And it says either Labor, you're causing some concern for the union, or hey, this is where we're seeing some more representation for working people.
So, of course, the core of the original alliance, along with perhaps the Greens, was New Labour, which was a reaction against the neoliberal turn of the Labour government under Longy and so forth. So do you feel that that was feeding on the same sort of lack of an option at the time back then?
Yeah, I do, but more so than feeding on a lack of an option, I think it was feeding on the fact that the direction that the party was taking was horrendously departed from what the actual party was based on, and that was combining the working people into an organised political party. Really, an extension of what the unions were doing.
Yeah. So we've seen in some places overseas, certainly there's signs that being more of a plain-spoken, of a socialist bent, and maybe what do they call it in New York? Is it Pothole Socialism or something like that? I think regarding Mamdani is going down quite well with people, and I noticed that Alliance has a lot of that sort of very pragmatic, straightforward approach on its website, and with a heavy emphasis on public ownership. So, yeah, what do you think would be the priorities in that? In that obviously this is heading towards an idea of a democratic socialist ideal with control over key aspects of economic relations, and how does the party relate to that?
Well, I think, and excuse me too, I should have said in my introduction, when it comes to the history of socialism, I'm not an erudite. I just know what I believe to be a decent sort of place to sit within the political spectrum based on my experience as a worker throughout my life. But just getting back to that question, it's interesting. Mamdani definitely has got some political capital now, and people are saying, this might represent that hole that they've noticed over there. In fact, they're a little bit sort of, when you look at the 80s here, they've got a two-party system whereby you're either with us or against us. There's no middle ground, and I think that's why we're starting to see the collapse, in my view, of the United States as the power that it used to be, really. And unfortunately, as they start to collapse, we're sort of seeing the behaviour of someone who's losing sort of the grip of it. But now I'm starting to digress. As I said earlier on, I'll go on a tangent. Do you want to sort of re-steer me back into there,
Well,
Kieran?
talk, for example, I was fascinated by bringing up the issue of the coastal shipping, for example. And I think that, this is obviously going to be a strong point for your party going forward, is basically not having your hands tied by neoliberal ideology and free market ideology, which, I mean, obviously maybe sometimes conceals vested interests, that you can actually simply come up with these kind of, again, I'm not sure it's the expression, but the pothole socialism thing, where you just go out and actually fix things rather than using a lot of verbiage about uh, about what what an ideological approach should be to the problems of the world.
Well, there are certainly plenty of things to fix that can be done relatively pragmatically rather than needing sort of to shore up support from others. They're just things that are the decent sort of basic needs of people within the country. And it's really just, I guess, redirecting a lot of the resource that's been going, in my opinion, and our party's opinion, has been wasted. A good example of that is the amount of 101 economics. Try to cease the leakage from your economy. I mean, what have we got? 5, 6, $7 billion worth of profit from the banks alone leaving the country. So it's simple stuff. Here, as far as the maritime stuff goes, and I will say this with a tiny bit of knowledge on that. So while my father and brothers we're a railway family, I had a stepfather who was on the Union Road Awiti in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, wow.
And so a little bit to do with, I used to go down as a younger guy every time they were in port, so you get a chance to go into the bar, but we won't go there too much. But again, we're an island nation. You would think that instead of every one of the ports having to compete against each other, we would in fact have a national strategy whereby what we're calling our hub and spoke approach, which is international cargo would be coming in the likes of Tauranga, Auckland, and Littleton, and then you have movement around the coast to the likes of your secondary ports, which might be Timaru, Port Chalmers, etc. All of those areas, of course, are linked to rail. So, because you've got to remember, this is no more than distribution. It's bringing stuff out and distributing stuff across the world. And as an island nation, that should be something that's really secure. It's interesting, this Cook Strait fiasco, if you ask me, I noticed that Peters has come out and said, "Oh, under no circumstances will it be sold out. It'll be under government control or whatever." But I think most of that stuff's been set up to fail, or rather than getting the irony of it all is rather than getting the most appropriate sort of ships, they're now talking about let's work out a budget and get what we can rather than what do we actually need. And I think a lot of people, especially you North Islanders, seem to forget that Cook Strait is actually an extension of State Highway 1, and it's absolutely critical that we can move that stuff across. Only just over a week ago, we lost our last domestic flagged and crewed ship here in Littleton, which is, again, like it's just diabolical. So we are proposing that it doesn't need to be ownership. The ownership of the particular port facilities can stay with each of the local or regional territorial authorities that have them, but there would be a national strategy. And the key to that and the benefit to all of those councils would be rather than competing and having to build infrastructure, which may not necessarily be needed if you're perhaps moving stuff around the country compared to moving mass amounts of containers coming in, you're making a saving for a start there anyway. You also get the opportunity to look at some of the environmental issues which are associated with it. So every port is not looking to dredge the bottom of its harbour out in order to be able to get bigger and bigger and bigger ships, which we know is what the world want. And we know as an island nation, we're actually at the mercy of whoever comes and goes from the country. What did the Finn brothers say? The tyranny of distance in one of their songs. It'll come home to roost if we haven't got a strategy that looks at how we distribute stuff in and then send stuff away.
Right, interesting. So, I mean, that obviously will take a lot more investment, right? Like financial and logistic, presumably work to make a change like that, would it?
Well, there is definitely investment needed, but again, we're not going to be doubling up on some of the infrastructure that's required at the moment in all of the ports because of the competitive nature that they have. Even for goodness sake, Littleton and Timaru. I mean, why are they competing? We're in the same province. We should be supporting it and saying you are better adapted or better capable of doing this particular activity while the other could be doing whatever it needs to be. And again, I'm suggesting that we have that a core area within the South Island to receive stuff from overseas and move high volume containers.
With a lot more rail integration,
Yeah,
presumably.
well, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, people in Christchurch and certainly Kokoda after the quakes and that, what we learnt was sea was absolutely important. We were just very fortunate. There was one of the Navy ships was in the harbour at the time of the big earthquake here and had the capacity to be making meals, generating power, doing all sorts. The same with up by Kokoda, the ability for the Navy to move in really, really quickly because the rail was cut off, actually, I think in both directions for the Kokoda quakes. So it's important that we invest heavily in that so that we've got that protection and that ability to move around. And again, I sound like a broken record, but we're an island nation. Part of it too might even be with the Chatham Islands. I know they have battled over and over about how do they get their goods and services backwards and forwards between the island and the mainland. In many cases, they're having to fly stuff, which is really impractical and certainly puts a great deal of expense onto whatever product it is, either going there or coming back. It just makes logical sense to me. And the beauty about it is our leader, Victor, is actually a member of the Maritime Union of New Zealand. And, this is really where he is. It's his forte. And it's really sound policy.
Yeah, well, that kind of, as you pointed out, like having a union affiliation, that's historic stuff, especially for a minor party that, not even in Parliament. I think that definitely says something about how comfortable the Labour Party, or how much the Labour Party has kind of treated unions, taking them for granted for years at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to kind of think about that change over time because I think the Labour Party is still on paper calls itself like a democratic socialist party or whatever, right? But as you point out, that hasn't really been the case for a long, long
Well,
time.
more social democrats, aren't they? Really?
Well, they'd love to be.
Potato. But I
Even
mean,
then,
potato. But I think that's the beauty about what I like about this party as well, the Alliance have come out and said, we're socialists. We
Mm.
believe in democracy, but we're socialists.
Mm. So, I mean, does that extend to things like democracy in the workplace? Do you talk much about like control, like worker control of different sectors? Is that going to be part of the policy suite?
Well, certainly not at this stage. But one of the really interesting thing is I noticed that the Greens have got the one for compulsory unionism. They're sort of, and there's been quite a bit of discussion about it, which is a very good thing. And certainly the fact that they're looking to move that way. Um, the general sort of split is great, but most of the people that I've been talking to who are kind of aligned to the party are saying what's more important is the right to strike, that we can withdraw our labour. That's the most critical part that we can have, because after all, that's what we bring to the table. So when it comes to those sorts of things, I would strongly suggest that if the Alliance gets the opportunity to have any involvement, we would be pushing down that track to restore some of the rights that workers have traditionally had, and in fact, in my view, should have still retained.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's all the criticism you can make of the Employment Contracts Act and that entire period of time, right? So I imagine that would be pretty high up in the list of
Very,
priorities.
very high up. Yeah, absolutely. And as with the amalgamation, well, not amalgamation, the relationship we now have with MUNS, we actually have one of the MUNS people sits on our executive as part of that relationship. So we would expect as things and build, we would have more involvement so that the policy that we're actually putting in there truly reflects what people who are working in this country require and want.
Hmm. Oh, amazing. You're as the environment guy, are you the spokesperson, the party's environment spokesperson at this point?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm officially the environment spokesperson, but I
According to the
kind of think
website, you are.
Uh-oh,
I
yeah.
think, I think, yeah, yeah. I think Victor at one meeting said, "Oh, you're the guy," and yeah, yeah. So pretty much I am, and I think that that reflects on my background. It also reflects on the fact that I've been a regional councillor and have, a pretty good solid understanding of where we are as far as this catastrophe that we're being led down,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
far as just an absolute abuse of this beautiful country that we have. The funny
Mm.
thing is when Kiwis ever go overseas, people go, oh, New Zealand, it's so wonderful. And it is, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to knock it. But if you really look at things, when I was a kid, I'm a motorcyclist, by the way, I've got a few old motorcycles. And when I was a kid, you could go anywhere and pull over on the side of the road and splash into the local creek or river or whatever it was, and you'd end up sort of filling a billy and making a cup of tea. You might brush your teeth in the river or what. You can't do that now. I mean, for God's sake, it's horrendous. And in fact, here in Canterbury at the moment, I've got this I'm currently working on through Environment Canterbury, even though I voted against it while I was still in there, got an exemption from the government to make some changes to the land and water plan for the region. And they're calling it Plan Change 8, which is effectively saying if you have a consent, you have the ability now to keep that consent, but change the use that you get, that you got it for, which is effectively rewarding people who have not only contributed to the detrimental state of freshwater networks within our region, but have also it's commodifying water. It's saying to people that, especially the ones that are intergenerational, who, in my view, every time it's wet, they get a payout. Every time it's dry, they get a payout. Every time it's windy, they get a payout. Now we're saying, hey, look, keep your consents and you do with it what you want. I mean,
It's essentially feudal. This is basically
yes.
rights given by the sovereign to landowners to charge what they want for as a rent.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's a lot like tenure review and don't get me wrong, I thought some of the tenure review was very good. I mean, the fact that someone can have a perpetual lease and a lot of people made a lot of money out of that. The irony was many of them ended up with areas near beautiful, pristine sort of lakes and subdivided. And the next thing they were very wealthy through that, which was effectively public land being given away in order to be able to get the title back from these perpetual lessees. It's nothing short of robbery, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be what I have to come back to you. I doubt it. No, I believe
Oh,
that.
no, no, no. I'm pretty sure you're allowed to say your opinion
Yeah, yeah, I am. That's right.
as long as it's
Absolutely.
genuinely held.
But can I just say that's the other bit to sort of extend out about the Alliance Party I like? What they're saying is there are many things in this country that have been developed or are here or on the backs of working people. We're the ones that paid for and built the dams. We're the ones, that maintained and built our railways. We're that type of thing. And yet they've been literally sold off. I mean, the great irony about the railways, not only did they sell the bloody thing off, Labor, let's not forget, corporatised it before National privatised it. They even then went about ripping up the lines that were existing. So even if we want to get back into it now, which we do, it's going to be a hell of a lot more expensive because a lot of stuff was deliberately ripped up so it could never be used again.
Yeah, so
Can't tell me that.
Yeah.
Can't tell me that's not a war of classes.
yeah, absolutely. That's peak class war stuff, right? And it's
Mm.
not, it's the rentierism, it's the commodification, the financialization of that entire project. So to wind that back, Ministry of Works, yes or no?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do absolutely, and I think you in the North Island have got your transmission gully as a classic example of why go out to the market and get someone to design it, to quantity survey it, to effectively be involved with the building of it, and then to walk away from the maintenance requirements that they have, putting that burden back onto, in this case, people who drive cars.
Yeah.
Horrendous. And Kieran will know this as well. If you ask people who live in Christchurch about the Ministry of Works, they'll tell you about Ellis's video or cinema, which is the old post office building. In the square, we've got the old post office building. There's the old public trust building. The Ministry of Works certainly knew how to build buildings. They're
It's
still there.
it's funny that that conversation is kind of cropping up more now, right? Now that all of these like PPPs over time are getting a worse and worse rep. Even right wingers won't full-throatedly endorse them anymore. You notice they get a bit weaselly about these kind of things these days. But just in general, I mean, as I'm just returning to your idea as you as the kind of environment spokesperson
Yes.
of
Yep.
a party with a very like unionist, almost like workerist kind of bent, it sounds like. Do you spend much time talking about the potential kind of conflicts in there? I mean, the stereotype is the environment versus, miners, for example, right?
Yep.
As a internal kind of disruption. And in the
Yep.
UK, we've had recently Keir Starmer's been replaced by Andy Burnham, who was seen by some
Yep.
people as a bit more kind of soft left of the party, maybe more sympathetic to the more blue collar maybe element of that party. And one of the first things he did is talk about, mining the North Sea or expanded oil and gas. So do you
Well,
have,
and to be fair, I think Trump has said to him, "You need to do that."
yeah, but I
We
mean,
want,
he's the
yeah.
he's the prime minister, right? So
Well, yeah.
Do
For
you
now,
have those kind of conflicts? I mean, how does that work behind the scenes when you're dealing with unions stressed about jobs versus what sounds like you have a very like environment first kind of values set, right?
I hear what you're saying and where you're coming. When I was a regional councillor, one of my fellow councillors, Grant Edge, used to talk about spatial planning a lot. And rather than localised or even from a regional perspective, there's the ability for us to be able to look across the country and say what fits best where. And within that discussion and conversation, you put what are these things that are important to not just environmentalists and tree huggers like me, but all people. I think to separate working people and unions away from the environment is ludicrous because I certainly know that people who work over at the wharves, many of them are avid anglers. I know that when I was in the Wakayama Club, there were many of them out on the harbour. You'd be Hector's dolphins and all sorts of stuff. Whakaropo, which is the Māori name for the Littleton Harbour, has a really solid environmental plan. And I know a lot of the people there involved with the shipping industry, working people, have real concerns about the extensions that they're proposing for the port, which is literally dumping material in, which happened after the earthquakes too. So all this material was literally dumped into the harbour, and so I don't think they are mutually exclusive. Saying that the environment over here and workers over here, we all want something for now, but to be able to feed our children, but we also want our children to have a future, and part of that is the environment.
And hopefully more so when it's your workplace, right? If you're fishing,
Yeah,
that's where you
oh,
are.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm sure that's the kind of pushback that you'll get, right? From a workers versus environment kind of perspective. It's just something we hear a lot from I guess it's a cynical kind of criticism, but I'm sure it's
Well,
something we've heard a
well,
lot.
again, though, a lot of this stuff is around about trying to divide communities of interest
Mm.
because when you divide communities of interest, it's a lot easier to control them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of your or the environment, the Alliance's environment policy, for example, how do you see that as you say it's quite similar to the Greens now, it seems like.
Yeah, it is.
But
It is very. Look, we absolutely are committed to mitigating the impact upon the climate. And I notice now that many of Western countries are suddenly going, "Oh, we're going to back off from that." It's frightening. The end of the day, I used to do some environmental education within the Tuhaitara Coastal Park area that I was responsible for. We had a lot of schools, relationships with the likes of universities, and you would get people in, and we literally had a glass dome that we could fill up with smoke and say, eventually this is what's going to happen. We have the ability to be able to utilize lots of technology. There's a really interesting one, the money that they're proposing to spend on this gas terminal up north. Why didn't we continue to talk about making the giant battery down in the middle of sort of towards Otago, where we were going to have this water body which would allow us to store, and when we needed water, when we needed power, we could move water to generate clean electricity. So,
Yeah.
am I? I don't know if there's enough detail for you there, but we're certainly working on stuff to say climate and the environment are important to us because they're important to everyone. And I used to also say to people, humans need to understand we're not apart from nature, we are a part of nature. And it's really essential that we ensure that happens. Workers in the tourism, look at what happened. We had the COVID issue that turned up, and what did we end up doing? We had this mahi for nature and jobs for nature, where people really embraced the fact that they could contribute to the environment. So, people want to do that. There's a job too. People are
Yeah.
making a
So
living out of it.
you could be the party could perhaps be favourably inclined towards something like a Green New Deal sort of statist environmentalist position. Do you think?
Yeah, well, again, my opinion, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
we will be releasing all of our policy a little later on, but certainly, yes, I think that's a fair assumption to make, Kieran.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's a false dichotomy to, as you say, we live in the environment. It's not separate from us. It's not some sort of elite obsession. It's something that working people do care about, and they always have. It's a bit of a lie to say that they haven't. And currently, if you look at the example of Andy Burnham doing his drill baby drill thing, at the time when they're having heat waves that have killed thousands of people. Now, he can say that it's because he's for the worker, but I don't think that the polls are going to show that the workers are very impressed with that sort of thing. And of course, these increasingly these extractive industries, they're not big employers anyway. So we have less of attention there these days than we used to. I mean, look at say Denniston um, or any of the things they're doing on the West Coast. Yes, they do get a constituency by riling people up about the economy, but they're not actually really offering big economic returns to the local community. They're just trying to make a quick buck and destroy the environment.
Well, it reinforces what was said earlier on, Kieran. It's about that 101 economics,
Mm.
stopping leakage from our economy, our internal economy, and and that's done by just coming in and taking and taking away the profit overseas.
Yeah.
And damn the end of it. You might remember every now and again we get the issue around about the aluminium smelter. Are they going to stay? Aren't they going to stay? It's important that people have jobs. We understand that. But they literally were going to walk away and we're left with all of this material. I think is it Clinton, where they had a big building stored with lots of the material that's left over after the process was literally crammed into a
Mataura?
shed, and there was some
Yep.
flooding and carried
Mataura,
off.
right by the river.
Yeah, that's
Very
Potato.
dangerous
That's
stuff.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. I mean, this is, we're always having to clean up this. Oh, way back decades ago, Bill Birch tried to shut down Tiwai Point because, the country are subsidizing Comalco, Rio Tinto Zinc. And they just said, no, they just told him outright, no, we'll bring down your government if you do that. So that
Exactly.
was a National Party minister, so
Yeah.
we seem to be stuck with them, even though they were threatening to leave us. I mean, oh dear, please don't go.
Well, we'll never go now because you know what's going to happen. Apparently, we're prime pickings for data centers.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
Well, isn't that the apotheosis of, everything we're talking about is this coming and constructing with basically no long-term job prospects connected to that,
that's
but
right.
infinite extractive potential, infinite commodification potential.
Absolutely.
So have you talked much about that side of things in the Alliance? Are you going to have positions on AI and data centers and all these big fun
Yeah,
things?
I'm really confident we are. Again, we want to. It's not my role to drop policy out there, but fundamentally, things that worry average working New Zealanders worry us because that's who we're trying to represent. And the language that that we're using, which Kieran sort of mentioned earlier on, is simply because I'm a nobody. I just happen to be a nobody who's put my name up for a candidacy. I remember when I first was elected to the regional council, I said, I'm a nobody. I just happen to be an elected nobody. I'm not here as a moral beacon. I'm certainly not here as an example to anyone else because I'm not qualified for that. But what I'm qualified for is to have a really strong opinion and background when it comes to environmental issues and the ability to be able to contribute to debate in order to be able to protect what's valuable to us as New Zealanders.
Ironically, that's quite a powerful moral kind of position of integrity to hold because you're saying, I'm not standing for you, I'm standing with you, right? That's actually quite powerful to speak
Well,
to.
that's what we have as workers.
Mm.
What we have as workers, and so I come from the days of compulsory unionism, and I'm slightly edging towards the right to strike over compulsion. I think if you start forcing people into it, there will be a bit of blowback. I think showing the benefits, and interestingly enough, one of my brothers is a boilermaker would say to this, the boss of where he works, it's a very big steel industry place here in Christchurch, said, I'll to all the young people, I'll give you $1.50 an hour more if you get rid of the union. So all these young kids left the union going, oh, we're going to get $1.50 more an hour, which is $60 a week. They came to get their pay after the fortnight and they were on less than what they'd been on because they lost their penal rate, their offside rate, their tool rate, all of the things that unions had worked for. And they were going, oh, what? But they'd signed up for a minimum of a year on these individual contracts. And the union said, well, we were telling you there are benefits to be. And that's what people need to see to join a union, not to be told you have to be in a union. But the things that are important to workers, as I said earlier on, are our ability to withhold our work, because that's what we have.
That's your leverage, yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Is that hitting home? I mean, how's your electorate campaign? What's Christchurch Central saying when you're telling them these things?
Well, the biggest message I'm getting when I'm out there, by the way, I'm not door knocking. I refuse to door knock because over the years, I've had the odd person come to my door and who's been reasonable, but most of them come to just tell me how brilliant they are and what they're going to do and why I need to vote for them because if I don't, I'm going to miss out on something.
And
I
most
don't
of
want to
them,
just, people's time is so valuable, especially on your own property. So I'm not going to hassle them. We're not going to, I'm certainly not putting flyers in boxes because what an absolute waste of resource. I have to own up though, I did print out 25 A4 printers when I stood for regional council, when I went, this is what I stand for. And on the back, I put a picture of a mouse, and I put, when you're finished with this, put peanut butter on it in your dark cupboard during the winter, and you'll find out if you've got rodents. So I wanted to at least make use of it. I'm sick of it. Other people may not be, but I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the waste. I'm sick of it's pretty patronising in most cases. But again, get back to your question. What am I hearing? I'm hearing people going, what's the point? So I actually went to the Electoral Commission. So not only do I go out sort of spruiking for, well, I certainly was looking for the membership when we were trying to re-register, but I went to the Electoral Commission because it's more important I hand out these, especially now that people can't enrol up on the day. I mean, talk about not wanting your people to vote. It's the most horrendous thing that's happened in the country for a long time,
Yeah, it's just
God.
openly anti-democratic, right? It's insane. It's insane.
Absolutely. And I keep saying to people, and they go, "What's the point? You're all the same." And I used to get really fucked off because of the fact, like, I've got grey hair and I am an older guy. I'm Pākehā. I'm one of those, with the name Burns, BYRNES. I'm Irish, but I'm a Kiwi. But I used to get really fucked off because people go, "Oh, look at all the, male stale people who sit around the table at Environment Canterbury." I'm not a multi-millionaire farmer.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I was raised by, eventually in the 60s, my mum was a solo mother with 4 children under the age of 8. I had 2 stints in state care. I left school thinking I was really dumb, and was lucky to get an apprenticeship. So, and I looked around this table at these people who are very privileged in many cases and have an expectation that when they talk, we all just go, "Oh, well, that must be it."
Yeah, yeah,
Fuck
yeah.
off, fuck
No,
off.
I think that's
Um,
it. I mean, it's the most shallow possible, like representational kind of politics, right? That I think
yeah.
we're all past that at this point, surely. 2026, we must be able to
Well,
discuss ideas.
I've always been so I was an independent when I stood for local council, but as an individual, I've done things like I declared war on the regime of George W. Bush. I took out a public notice in the paper. Part of that was sort of the cathartic feeling I had by putting something out there, but I was so sickened by what went on. I challenged Nick Smith to a fist fight when he said that we're now going to make water swimmable overnight by allowing double the amount of pollution. Look at it; it's gone from wadeable to swimmable, and I was so sickened by that. What could I do? Challenge him to a fist fight with the loser to have to swim in a local swimming hole, which was really degraded. So look, some people go, "Oh, they're gimmicks," but you can't just. We have to find ways where, as individuals or as collectives and groups, to say this is not enough. This is just not acceptable. And I love the fact that, for example, there is a party that's being registered now because they're so appalled and sickened by what's been going on in Palestine. And for whatever the purpose is, and whatever people think of them, they're saying we want to put this front and centre because we think that if we are a bastion of international law, as we always put ourselves up to be, and if we are one of these countries we've always boxed above our weight, all of these sort of these things are, that we've names that we've given ourselves. If we really really believe that, then we have to be put on the spot and to be able to say, I think this is a genocide and it's appalling. And by the way, I am happy to be on record saying that, and also that we should be kicking out our ambassador, the Israeli ambassador. So I'll throw that one in there while I'm at it. But
Yeah,
it's
well,
great.
it is interesting. Ali Abunimah was saying at a talk recently that this has become a local electoral issue throughout the globe, everywhere. And that's beyond anything that happened with South African apartheid even. So there's definitely changes in the air. A lot of people, a lot of the people who pose as centre left are having to rapidly change their support of Israel, or tone it down a great deal.
I mean, look how shocked people were when they saw the Reverend Sue Bennett getting arrested, an 86-year-old
Mhm.
reverend being arrested for saying, "I don't support this. We need to make something." I mean, you got to say the world's gone pretty crazy if that's the sort of acceptable level of our Western countries who support international law. That's where we've ended up with. You look at the German police, the thuggery on the way that they behave for people that are protesting. It's just look at what they're doing in England, you know, and the
Look,
dog
I
whistle
mean,
politics where they're saying,
a
yeah.
counterpoint to that is that the world has gone crazy if people at the age of 87 are taking up being a terrorist. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, good call. That's good call.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a search for integrity, right? You say it's become like a local election issue around the world, and it certainly it's something that people are talking about. You know, it's the almost pat kind of like think global, act local, but maybe it's just because people are looking for integrity, right? Like it's
absolutely.
who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? You know, if we're sitting watching the TV and seeing this monstrousness, and then the people who are meant to be representing us on the world stage saying things that are just fundamentally incompatible with our kind of basic humanity. I don't think it's surprising that people are starting to say enough's enough, right? This is even the like war on terror was 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
this shit's still going on, and it's with the same kind of neocon mentality and above it all kind of righteousness with billionaires, military industrial complex, all that noise. Yeah, so I think it does come home, right? And then we've got Rocket Lab in New Zealand, kind of gleefully playing along. And then yeah, we're synced in with this international network. You know, finance capital doesn't respect borders.
Well, now we're being told too that we have to up our defence spending, and part of that is because we need to protect our access to markets, which ironically is China, who are apparently the baddies, who have given us a free trade deal, uh, and the people telling us to do that are the United States, who have never given us a free trade deal, who withheld information that the French were going to blow up the Greenpeace warrior, that did everything they could possibly do to put pressure on us when we said that we were going to be anti-nuclear, and when we couldn't sell our sheep and lamb to anyone else, when Iran and Russia came on board, put sanctions in place so that we destroyed our sheep and our lamb industry. You know, so these are the people that we need to be doing our bit for. You know, ridiculous.
And
By the way,
use
I'm
our
not a communist. Yeah.
they also use our spy bases to spy against our own businesses for and give the commercial advantage to their own. But yeah,
Absolutely.
so
Well, I always remember too, Kieran, that do you remember when they used to bug Angela Merkel, who was
yeah,
supposedly
yeah.
the leading the free Europe.
Well, in 2002, they because the UN buildings in New York, they had incredibly extensive surveillance on everyone in the lead up to pressuring everyone into going along with the invasion of Iraq. And then they have the gall later to start talking about Russian compromat. You know, when they're blackmailing an entire globe into a
I
war
know.
crime. But yeah. Anyway, so we are going very tangential at the moment. But I was going to bring
Sorry.
it back to the part. No, no, no.
That's good.
um, just thought we should go back to the party sort of thing. But there's
Yes.
a strong sense that there is a that you work on fundamental principles and direct answers to them. So you have healthcare and education as rights. So you want free healthcare, free education, free tertiary education, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just say on that, our view is this: we just see tertiary education as an extension of all education, primary and secondary. And why should people be burdened with a cost? I'll give you an example. My daughter has a PhD here at University of Canterbury, and she had a really big student debt. When she went to get a mortgage when she got married, she had to leave the university as a lecturer and get a real job because they didn't consider that income, and she had a student debt. Ridiculous.
Wow, wow, yeah, that's ridiculous. And then in terms of health, primary health, obviously specialties and mental health, like dental care, similar, would you say it's a similar kind of approach?
Absolutely. Look, when I lived in Australia, no one has a problem at the end of the year when you get your tax form and it has a separate item that says Medicare, because you know you're going to be covered. And we wouldn't be running the health system down, giving everything to the private sector to go, oh, well, at least they can cope with it. This is only my opinion, by the way. I'd be ringing up Cuba if I was in charge going, can you give us 500 doctors? And can we send 500 kids over to be trained?
Yes, we definitely need to do something about primary healthcare in this country.
Absolutely, we do.
It's getting insane.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to maybe be a bit more critical about, though, is that I notice you say that there's a right to affordable housing, not a right to housing. And I'm kind of like, that language, which is used across the political spectrum, has always troubled me, because homeless people can't afford anything. So what does affordable mean? You probably don't know, but I thought I'd
Well,
ask you anyway.
my opinion on what does affordable mean means that you live in a house, that you have the opportunity to actually take on home ownership if that's what you choose to do. My parents in the 1960s cashed in their family allowance, which allowed them to get a mortgage, and that was a loan, and that was great. You know, why can't we be doing that? Why do we have to have overseas banks? People are so, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? We've been so conned by what it's all about to actually have a mortgage, for example. No one turns up with a big briefcase and goes, 497,501, 497,503, or, you know, there's no money. It's all this ephemeral nature of stuff. And in many cases, the lending organisations don't necessarily have that available. It's because they only have a certain amount of risk to carry. Why can't our government be doing what they used to do in the old days and saying, we'll cover you for your first home? So to me, that's what affordable housing is, you know.
Yeah,
I see
yeah.
Mamdani too has just put a 1 year rent freeze on their on any of the housing that I've forgotten what the name of it is. Sorry, Kieran and Phil, but he's just put a 1 year rent freeze on. So he's saying to people, we understand that you know, cost of living is so hard. Andy Burnham, though, what's he done? $10 is it $10 a month? You're going to get relief for energy or something like that. That's VAT off your power bill.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a windfall for the government, the amount of VAT they will have been getting as the energy prices spike. So he's giving them
absolutely
a pittance from what they're actually taking off them.
I know. And that's it. That's a great argument about gasoline prices here in the country, you know. Instead of using percentages, it's the same with minimum pay rates and stuff like that. In my young years, it was a dollar or cent figure that was always put on the increase, which meant that the manager was getting the same amount of money, and it meant that things moved along like that, rather than you get 10% of what you're getting and I get 10%, which continued to break that lump or barrier that we used to have, you know, where everything moved together.
Where's the incentive for someone to be a super high performing CEO who is basically has amazing skills that makes everything work well, though?
Magic skills,
I mean, yeah, they clearly do have those skills. Otherwise, they wouldn't get paid that much, would they?
Yeah, just like Baxendale as the CE for Christchurch City Council. You know, and the very next person to step in, Mary Richardson, who I have to just say I've got a lot of admiration for, said I'll do it for $100,000 less. I mean, and when I spoke to her and said, look, just as a ratepayer, I just want to say to you, Mary, thank you. That's awesome. She said, Greg, when I was younger, when you had a government or a local government job, it allowed you some form of security. So you didn't expect to have lots of money as your salary. The win for you as an employee was you had at least some security and tenure. And she got it, you know, which is great. God, we are going on tangents, aren't we? Sorry.
No. Could I bring it back to Christchurch Central? Do you want to talk about
sure.
Christchich Central? Like, it's an interesting electorate because, like, it's changed, but it still probably skews quite left. It was for 2 terms. It was under National, but it's traditionally been Labour seat. And before that, the closest that there came to a Labour upset was in 1996, where Tim Barnett was nearly unseated by the Alliance. So, yeah.
I'm very proud to say that part of Christchurch Central where I live, takes in Waltham and Sydenham, which was Jim Anderton's old stomping ground.
Oh,
Also
wow.
the home of Mabel and Ted Howard. Norman Kirk was over there at one stage as well. And it's also the cemetery for Fred Cook, who was one of the founding members of the New Zealand Socialist Party. So I'm in an organisation called the Sydenham Socialist and Motorcycle Enthusiast Society. And those are people that we hold very near and dear to us as far as people that we believe had very good values and a real commitment to the community. For me, Christchurch Central, I think there are a lot of issues at the moment, and most of them seem to be captured by issues around what the local government are doing or not doing, and that is the intensification that's taken place, which has not actually worked the way that was anticipated, with more people moving in. In fact, what we're ending up with is more Airbnb. So we actually have this sort of transient population that moves in as events staged at the new stadium or at the events centre, whatever it may be. So in fact, you don't end up with that sense of community. The other one that I think is massive, we are the second largest city in the country now, and we don't want the mistakes that Auckland had. We always talk about Sir Dovemeyer Robinson trying to secure corridors and land for Auckland transport, which never really came about. We still have a bit of an opportunity now, and we have a really solid Greater Christchurch strategy and our mass rapid transport. So that's a focus that the government needs to be doing. We need to be committing to that. I often say, I don't have a car, by the way. I have a lot of motorbikes, but I don't have a car. I travel by electric bike around the city, which is great. I often say to people, it's a shame in a way that there was the money was put towards a lot of people who could afford to have electric cars getting a subsidy to do that. And I understand why. I would have rather that money went into moving the masses through public transport. And that's the solution to me. So those are some of the things that I know are important to people within that Christchurch Central area. And Kieran, you rightly say the dynamics have changed dramatically. I love it. It's a very cosmopolitan feel. We have a real diversity of culture occurring in there now, which is something that thankfully Christchurch needed to get away from, as we all know anyway. We've got a pretty terrible sort of history in some parts, given that we're a place of the old school tie and the haves and have-nots. Now we've got this amazing diversity working really well for our community. What else can I can mention that while it's not completely within the Christchurch Central area, I did have some people from the University of Canterbury catch up with me earlier this week. Obviously, some of the issues are around things like the cost of education, also the ability to access it, transport, and lodgings, accommodation for them too, especially when they live out of town and moving in. So those are the sorts of things which I believe that there is a role for government to have in those, which is supporting local government as well, and those tertiary education providers.
Yeah, I believe there's actually a reasonable number of students in the electorate who study at Canterbury, and of course there's the Polytech here as well. So student issues are definitely, it's a very young electorate as well these days. So yeah, and with one of the highest after Auckland Central, the highest number of non-homeowners as well. So renters.
Well,
renters
funny you
and
should
young
say that,
people.
Kieran.
Yeah.
I live in a deprivation 10 area, so I'm in Waltham. I'm
Mhm.
down by towards Ensel's Road, Braham Street, Ferry Road, within that block there. So deprivation 10, and yet um, I have home ownership. I have a degree. I have a family to support me. My brother actually lives in the house next to me. They're very old and cold, but nevertheless we own them, which is really important. he's full of chickens and rabbits and all sorts. I've got veggie gardens and fruit trees. So we have some amount of um, luxury, if you like, within a deprivation 10 area. We have space around us, which is awesome.
Well,
So,
that's the sort of thing that neoliberalism is seeking to take away. Of course, the medium density is all townhouses. Very few of them have enough to give you that sort of resilience. There's a lot of community gardens around, I noticed, but these things don't uh, don't create profits or a tax take. So there's not much of a constituency among elites, among political capitalist elites
yeah.
to promote that sort of thing, even though it is by far the best thing for people. And I think, I mean, I don't know if you would agree, but I think the stadium for me epitomizes like the evils of neoliberalism because I've taken away a huge amount of space, spent a huge amount of money to enclose off an area, and you can only go into it if you're actually quite well off,
Yeah.
and you're willing to pay money for whatever that, watching some tiny dot in the distance sing music or watching some other dots run up and down after a ball or whatever, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been in one of these places and I'm never going to, so I'm not talking from personal experience. It all strikes me as extremely weird, and most people do not go and watch sports in this country. It's actually a minority thing, and I'd imagine the prices are incredibly prohibitive just from what I hear about the nature of sports these days as well.
And
So
it's already on its way to being taken over. I see that some football event wanted to host some sort of ethnic tournament there, but has been told they can't rent the stadium because rugby hasn't decided what its season's going to be like at this stage. I mean, that's pretty ordinary, given that we were told that the stadium was about, being inclusive, multi-use, and it appears that it's going to be another one of the rah-rah rugby boys
yeah, and for
facilities.
and for people around the area to sell Airbnb and parking and like queuing up for overpriced shitty food at 1 o'clock in the morning, um, sort of thing.
Well, a lot of the cafes are saying that bars are doing relatively well, but a lot of the cafes are not.
Mm.
The other issue is you talked about the impact it has on that sort of localized area. It's actually bigger than that, Kieran. The roadworks go all the way out to the four Avs to stop vehicles. If you're along Morehouse Ave, you can't turn in there,
I've been
because there
stuck
are
there.
traffic cones
Yeah,
everywhere.
I have been stuck there. It's insane. I don't really. I'm just. I mean, no one. I don't think anyone would have actually voted for this had they known what they were getting. So I mean, it was a great
Well,
opportunity
ironically,
to say I told you so. But yeah,
Ironically,
it's horrible.
Kieran, a lot of the people who voted for it actually lived outside of the ratepayer base. We had 90 odd people from Ashburton, for example, said that the council should support the development of a regional stadium, but of course we don't want to contribute to the maintenance of it.
How
But
convenient.
nevertheless,
I mean, this is often what you get with like in Auckland, it was community center, it was convention center, sorry, during the John Key
Mm.
years, famously, right? But yeah, just the construction. Politicians love to open shit, right? Cutting a ribbon has some kind of je ne sais quoi that they can never quite wean themselves away from doing.
or planting trees. They
Yeah.
like planting trees when there's a photo opportunity. And can I just say, as a whip off on a tangent, there's a tree in Cathedral Square that allegedly the Queen planted. I did it as an apprentice. She put one scoop of soil on.
What a backstory. I love that. That's very cool. I think we should rat on that note. The Queen's tree planter
Oh,
here
right. Yeah.
standing for the standing for the Alliance. Do you want to leave people with a bit of a plug? Maybe drop some website links or how people can get involved if anything's been sparked.
Well, the
Definitely
one
our kind of standard listeners are the kind of people who might be interested in coming along to stuff, learning a bit more, or at least kind of getting in touch to see what you guys are up to for the campaign.
Alliance Party of Aotearoa New Zealand, we've got a main website, we've got a main Facebook, we've got localised Facebook sites as well, all of our candidates. But I really, the message I want to get across to everyone is enrol to vote. You must enrol to vote. Don't leave it too late because it's gone then. At least you have an option. Should you decide not to, you'd be foolish, but should you decide not to, so be it. But at least you want to give yourself the option. It's the most important thing you can do when you're looking at supporting us as a wider community.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
not going to go on and on about it, but we're pretty simple. The other bit we never talked about was tax, because everyone hates talking about tax, but we are looking at progressive tax, as is the way. We want to, over time, get rid of regressive taxes like GST, and we want to raise the threshold before it, so it would be zero tax up into about 20,000.
Oh, wow.
And why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we tax people that earn lots of money? I mean, we've got CEs in this country that are earning millions of dollars. Why not? Why when everyone who works pays tax on every dollar they earn, why when you have lots of money and wealth, you don't?
So is that a wealth tax or a capital
We
tax?
are looking at a wealth tax too,
Cool.
because at the end of the day, if you're taxed on every dime you make as a worker, why aren't you taxed on every dime you make because of the fact that you bought a building or a house or whatever it may be?
Yeah, whatever passive income, right?
Absolutely.
Land taxes?
At this stage, I can't talk any more on taxes. This has all been done, but it will
Yeah.
be released. Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Look, we'll probably hopefully get you back, or at least a few people from the Alliance over the next few
Well,
months
there's a
as
couple of
stuff comes
people I
out.
reckon, a couple of people you should talk to. My favourite candidate of all is Courtney, who is a law student out at Canterbury University. If you're looking for the realest person within the Alliance Party, I would suggest her, or maybe even Victor's good for a good conversation as well.
Yeah, great. I will definitely do that. Kieran, did you want to sign off with anything?
No. Thank you for inviting me along.
Always. Always. Been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Kieran. Thanks very much, Greg.
Cheers.
Have a wonderful
Well, I hope you got some
week.
sense out of it.
Always. We'll make it make
Fantastic.
sense.
Thank you.
Cheers, Greg. That's been another episode of 1 of 200, your New Zealand podcast campaign season podcast. We will catch you next week.